Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Bytes, the Miami Herald's Miami Marlins podcast. I'm Jordan McPherson, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. on the 4th of July as the fireworks are going on behind me. Flying solo this week with Andre taking a couple days off. There's a lot to discuss, so let's just jump right into everything. First off, the quick recap from this past week's road trip. After the Marlins dropped the first two games against the St. Louis Cardinals 9-0 on Monday and 5-3 on Tuesday, they salvaged the series finale on Wednesday before heading to DC to sweep the Nationals in the four-game set, winning the first two games against the Nationals with relative ease before needing extra innings on both Sunday and Monday to close out the series. A few notables from this stretch, specifically the five-game win streak. How about three separate go-ahead, two-out, two-run home runs in the ninth inning or later? Avisail Garcia did it first in the finale against the Cardinals to back Sandy Alcantara's complete game on the mound. Jesus Sanchez then did it himself on Sunday in the top of the ninth inning against Washington. The Nats managed to rally in the bottom half of the inning to force extras, but the Marlins scored 3 runs in the top of the 10th to come away with the win. And then Brian De La Cruz did it in the 10th inning on Sunday series finale, hitting a Tanner Rainey fastball just off the foul pole in left field to secure the sweep. When you add in Nick Fortes's home run against the Mets on June 26th, the Marlins became the first team in MLB history to hit 4 go-ahead home runs with 2 outs in the ninth inning or later in the span of just 9 days. Then you have to also factor in the starting pitching. Alcantara's complete game against the Cardinals, of course, that's a highlight, and we'll talk about him more in a little bit. But Pablo Lopez on Sunday carried a no-hitter into the 7th inning. And Braxton Garrett allowed just 1 run over a career-high 7 1/3 innings on Monday against Washington. Then you look at Daniel Castano. He allowed just 1 earned run in 5 innings on Saturday against Washington. Pablo and Sandy, we're expecting less of the two of them. They're the top two of the staff. But when you look at the efforts that the Marlins are getting from Daniel Castano and Braxton Garrett specifically, that's probably one of the key aspects of this rotation as the Marlins look to make this run ahead of the All-Star break. The two of them are filling in the back end of the rotation that's been hit by injuries. Again, Jesus Luzardo's been out for a couple months now, probably not going to see him until after the All-Star break. Edward Cabrera just started throwing bullpen sessions again. He's probably not going to be back until the All-Star break. So with both of those guys out, the Marlins need Castano and Garrett, and of course Trevor Rogers, who finally had another solid outing, to keep contributing if Miami wants to stay in the playoff race. And finally, the Marlins got 2 key players back with the return of Brian Anderson and Joey Wendell. Both the two of them together, they unlock a lot of what the Marlins tried to do with how they constructed their lineup back in the offseason. Wendell being able to play third base, shortstop, and second base. Anderson being able to play third base and the corner outfields. It allows them to have a little bit of flexibility, give guys off days, move guys around the field. And when both of them were out for basically all of June, the Marlins were handcuffed. John Birdie basically had to play third base every day. Jazz Chisholm Jr. had to play second base every day. Miguel Rojas had to play shortstop basically every single day. All of those guys were pushed to potentially their brink. Jazz went on the IL with the back injury on Wednesday. So to have Wendell and Anderson both back, it gives the Marlins a lot of options and a lot of variety with what they can do with their lineup, similar to what we saw with them in April when they started the season off 12-8. How much that helps them is going to be key down the road. But first and foremost, going 5-2 on this trip, it puts the Marlins on the cusp of a 500 record again for the first time since early May. They're 2 under 500 at this point, and it keeps them in the playoff race. At worst, they're hovering between 4 games and 5 games out of the final wild card spot, which St. Louis Cardinals hold. You still have the San Francisco Giants, who are a couple games ahead of the Marlins, and the Philadelphia Phillies are still a couple games ahead of the Marlins. But the fact that they went 5-2 here, the fact that they're almost at 500, and they have about 25 games left before the August 2nd trade deadline, this is their time to make their push, make their run, and do what they need to do to put themselves in positions to be buyers if they want to be able to make that playoff push. And again, it's finding ways to continue to build on the 5-game win streak. And that starts with winning games that should be won. That's what Miami did against the Nationals. Not just these 4 games, but all season. They're 12-1 against Washington right now. They are going to have to do that with some of the other teams that they have over this next month-long stretch. 12 of their 25 games before the deadline are against the Reds and the Pirates, two of the lower ranking teams in the National League. They have to feast on those two. If they have to feast on those two teams, especially considering 10 of their other games in this stretch are against the New York Mets, 7 of those, 4 in New York, 3 in Miami, and a 3-game series with the Philadelphia Phillies. If they can find a way to tread water with those 10 and then do well against Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, it gives the Marlins a chance. But before all of those games, the Marlins have a marquee, albeit quick series on its hands coming up over these next 2 days. Tuesday and Wednesday, Lone Depot Park. The Miami Marlins are hosting the Los Angeles Angels, facing them for the second time. They lost both games in Anaheim over that first week of the series. And I know what you're thinking, marquee matchup when you see these two teams' records. Both are sub 500. The Angels have already fired Joe Madden. They're, I believe, going on an interim acting manager after all the suspension, everything that happened with that fracas with the Seattle Mariners. But ignore all of that. Ignore the team parts of it. I want to just focus on 3 names: Sandy Alcantara, Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout. Arguably baseball's best pitcher of the season in Sandy Alcantara, and 2 of the league's biggest stars on the field in Miami at Lone Depot Park for the next 2 days. Alcantara starting on Tuesday opposite Noah Syndergaard, and it's going to be Sandy's first time facing the Angels and his latest chance to extend this torrid run that has him not only as what feels like a virtual lock to be an all-star, but also it's giving him a serious case to be the National League starter for the Midsummer Classic. Alcantara enters that game leading Major League Baseball with 115 and 1/3 innings pitched and a 1.95 ERA. That's the 3rd best in baseball. The only 2 with better ERAs are the Dodgers' Tony Gonsolin and the Rays' Shane McClanahan, which, quick aside there, McClanahan and Alcantara, be pretty cool to see the two Florida teams having the starting pitchers for the All-Star game. Definite possibility. I'm vouching for it. We'll move on from that in a minute. Back to Alcantara. 10 consecutive starts where he's pitched at least 7 innings. 9 of those 10 starts, he's given up no more than 2 earned runs. He has 2 complete games in that stretch. No other pitcher in baseball has multiple complete games. And for good measure, Alcantara also has another 9-inning performance in that span that he had against the Washington Nationals that the Marlins won via walk-off earlier, I believe about a month ago. And then you look at who they're facing. Shohei Ohtani, 2-way star, international superstar, reigning AL MVP. He's starting on the mound Wednesday, folks. If you're in Miami and you have a chance to see Shohei Ohtani pitching and hitting in the same game, get there. I'm unfortunately not going to be there. I am going to have to be watching it vicariously, watching it from a distance. Long story short, Marlins, after those 2 games with the Angels, are going back on the road and going to New York. I'm already in DC. Logistically, it just made sense for me to stay up here instead of basically coming back to South Florida for 36 hours to fly back. So David Wilson and Greg Cody will have you covered from the Angel series down to Miami. I'll be picking things back up Thursday in New York. But again, Shohei Ohtani, what can we say about him? 2.68 ERA, 101 strikeouts over 74 innings, 18 home runs and 51 RBI at the plate. Again, the dude's just a phenom. It's incredible to watch him do it, how he does it, and just the consistency you're seeing from him, especially as of late. He's returning back to that all-star form, and not just because of the fact that he's doing the two-way thing. He's producing, and he's becoming, and he's living up to that superstar status. And then you have Mike Trout, who only has 23 home runs, 47 RBI, and a near 1,000 OPS as he's about a week away from locking up his 10th All-Star appearance. So again, big matchup, big names in this matchup over these next 2 days in Miami. Enjoy them, watch them. And if the Marlins are able to pull out a sweep here against the Angels, they'll be at 500 going up against the Mets. Very important timing wise here. And to round out the big league side of things, second phase of All-Star voting for starting position players begins Tuesday. And for the Marlins, that really involves just one name, Jazz Chisholm Jr. Second, it's him and versus Ozzie Albies head-to-head for the starting second base job for the National League for the All-Star game. Jazz obviously going for not only his first All-Star appearance, but also the first All-Star appearance by a Bahamian-born player in general. We've seen what Jazz has been able to do. He leads second baseman in OPS, home runs, RBI. He's been one of the top second basemen in baseball. But it's also worth noting both Jazz and Ozzie Albies are on the IL right now. Albies has a fractured foot. He's not expected to be back until August at the earliest. Jazz went on the IL in St. Louis with a lower back strain. He's only on the 10-day IL. The earliest he'd be able to come off is the 9th, Friday. But the Marlins, I don't think there's a need to rush it. Again, especially with a guy of this caliber getting to the status that he's getting to, you don't want a back injury, which is always a tricky injury, regardless of who it is, regardless of how healthy or fit or well ready a player is. Backs are always a tough situation to deal with. I would not be surprised if Jazz isn't back on the field until after the All-Star break. He is rehabbing in Jupiter, but it's a matter of how the Marlins want to balance that. As for the voting itself, it takes place on MLB.com. Fans are able to vote once per day between Tuesday and Friday. Voting closes, I believe it's 2 p.m. Friday, and the starters are going to be announced on ESPN at 7 p.m. Friday. The rest of the rosters are unveiled on Sunday. So this gives the Marlins a chance for, at a minimum, it looks like the Marlins have a good case for at least 2 All-Stars if Jazz does get voting, because Sandy Alcantara is a lock. Pablo Lopez looked like he was trending toward that, except he had a June to forget. His June ERA was hovering in the 5s. But who knows? There could be a case where both Pablo and Sandy are on the All-Star roster, which would give the Marlins a chance for 3. But I would think, obviously, at a minimum, it's Sandy. Jazz looks like he has his case if he gets voted in and if he's healthy enough to be able to participate in festivities in Los Angeles. And we'll break all of that down as well on next week's podcast once we have the full rosters on hand. And now to shift to the minor league side, we went very hitter heavy on last week's episode. I realized that after the fact. And because of that, I want to give some of the pitchers inside the Marlins organization some love here. We'll start with that by addressing the main 2 that we talk about basically every week. Max Meyer, he's looked to be back. After missing that month with the right ulnar nerve irritation, on Sunday, he threw 6 shutout innings, 5 strikeouts, no walks, just 2 hits, and only needed 61 pitches to throw those 6 innings for AAA Jacksonville. It was his first time going at least 6 innings since April, which is really good, especially when you consider what the pitch count was. He only needed 61. You can tell that they're still being cautious with the buildup, but the fact that he was able to get through 6 on only 61 pitches, it's looking like it might be only a matter of time. And again, you only have about 2 or 3 more turns through the rotation before the All-Star break. But once you get to the second half of July, once you get into August, depending on where this team is, heck, either way, whether they're buyers or sellers, Max Meyer looks like he can help this team in one way or the other. If they're sellers, they end up shipping guys off and they use the last 2 months to see what Max Meyer has. If Max Meyer continues on the pace that he was pre-injury and has more outings like he did on Sunday, and the Marlins are in a playoff push, they very well could try to find a role for him on the big league club to help him make that push over the final 2 months. For some of the other guys, Yuri Perez, another very solid outing, 1 run allowed on 4 hits and 3 walks with 8 Ks over 5 innings for AA Pensacola on Thursday. His 3rd consecutive start in which he went at least 5 innings and gave up no more than 2 runs. And we've been saying it basically every week. After those first 3 outings in AA, where it was 18-year-old Yuri going on 19-year-old Yuri facing guys 2 to 3 years above him, he finally settled in. He looks good. And I'm assuming we're going to be seeing him in LA in the Futures game, which again, all that should be getting announced very soon as well. And as for some names that we haven't discussed as much this year, but deserve some recognition, I'm going to start with MD Johnson. He's the Marlins' number 28 overall prospect by MLB Pipeline, and he's been steady for high A Beloit. He was their 6th-round pick in 2019 out of Dallas Baptist, 2.92 ERA this year, 80 strikeouts against just 15 walks over 71 innings and 12 starts. But it's the last 6 starts, his second half of what he's done so far this season. 1.95 ERA in a stretch in at least 7 strikeouts in all 6 of those outings. 3 of those 6 outings, he's gone at least 7 innings, giving up no more than 2 runs. And works pretty well. Fastball sits 92 and 94, 92 and 94, touches 96. His slider is his best secondary pitch. He's developing a changeup, developing a curveball. And he's a guy who, again, he's pitches deep. He's showing durability. He looks like a guy who could be a potential number 4, number 5 in a rotation. And it's building some solid depth in the Marlins in the lower levels of the Marlins system. Another couple guys who are in the lower levels. One who just got moved up to Double-A. Zach King and Dax Fulton. King, 2019 draft pick, out of Vanderbilt, teammate with JJ Bleday during their College World Series run. He was just promoted to Double-A Pensacola this week after a really good run in Beloit, 87 Ks over 65 innings, 2.77 ERA. We'll see what happens as he gets into facing the upper minors, but good for him to see him moving up. Dax Fulton was a second round pick in 2020, high school lefty out of Oklahoma. Again, remember, last year was his first year in about a year and a half of pitching after undergoing Tommy John during his high school senior year. He stayed healthy all last year, which was his main goal. This year, he's trying to find that consistency and taking that next step. He's still striking out a lot of guys, 84 Ks over 61 innings, but it's a 5.16 ERA over 13 starts. There is a lot to like with him. His fastball is good. His curveball is swing and miss. If he can just get that command under control and start limiting the hits that are coming against him, he could become a very good depth piece in there. Again, he's top 10 in their minor league system ranking. So there is still a lot of promise in there. He's young. He's only 20. He has a lot of potential in there, and I'm interested to see what happens as he builds on the second half of the season. And then last guy to mention on here, pitching-wise, Brian Hoeing continues to hold his own after being moved up to AAA. Knack for pitching deep in the games. He's gone at least 6 innings in 6 of his 10 starts with the Jumbo Shrimp. And he's a guy who the Marlins really started realizing that they may have had something with him in the second half of the 2021 season. They started seeing some more development with him, some more consistency out of him, and they're really starting to like what they're seeing from him as he continues at staying his aim consistency in AAA. And again, it's a matter of finding that depth that they need, especially when you look at where the Marlins are in the big leagues right now, where, again, all of their main guys who are healthy are up with the big league club right now. And it's a matter of who it could be, that emergency guy, those emergency 2 guys who could come up to make spot starts or end up having to hold down a spot if things happen. They found diamonds in the rough before. Zach Thompson last year, Cody Poteet last year. And now they're potentially have those type of guys in the Brian Hoeing. And it just is a fortunate situation for the Marlins to be in, especially as they continue with the injuries. And to just quickly round out the updates, Jesus Luzardo and Edward Cabrera started throwing bullpen sessions. Sixto Sanchez threw a second bullpen session on Wednesday, and I'm assuming he's going to be throwing another one at some point this week, and we'll see what happens from there. Cody Poteet began a rehab assignment with Single A Jupiter on Monday. Jordan Holloway is finally off the minor league IL, and he's back with AAA Jacksonville. So Marlins are starting to get healthy on the pitching front, which is ideal, especially now that their lineup is starting to get healthy as well. So if everything can start rounding in the form, they can start getting as close to full strength as they've been for the first time in a while, while they have to make this while they make this push to stay in the playoff hunt, I should say. The timing is probably as good as it's been and as good as it could be. Whether that all plays out, we'll find out. And with that, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Fish Bytes. Thanks so much for listening in. We'll be back again next week to recap what happened with the Marlins 2 series with the Angels and the Mets, and basically give one of our final 2 progress reports before the All-Star break. Thanks so much, everyone.